This will be a bit fast paced, and thanks for joining. We'll have two presentations. I'll go ahead and quickly show you a video about SOP Technologies and what we do. Our focus is to address water pollution issues, and we're hoping that this webcast with the presentations from Abril and Jacob will provide you with some insights so you can replicate those types of efforts locally.
Cities have a major problem when it comes to pollution. Pollution that you see at the street level makes its way into pipes and it flows straight out into waterways without any treatment at all. So in order to address these issues, we have two solutions. One solution is digital, the other is physical. On the digital side, we have sensors. These sensors capture data at the storm drains, so public works departments can save money by focusing their efforts in cleaning pollution where they need to do it most. They also prevent floods because they don't get there too late when the pollution has accumulated so much that water is backing up into the street. On the physical side of things, we have our stormwater filters. This is our patented technology that works more effective than others. The way that it works is it blocks debris at the street, so stormwater professionals can simply clean it out. They save money because they don't have to use vacuum trucks. They also prevent floods because the pipes are not getting clogged with debris. And of course, our mission is to stop ocean pollution, and we do this by preventing that debris from making its way out into the oceans. Now that you know more about our technologies, please tell others so that we can work together to stop ocean pollution.
Good morning or afternoon. My name is Abril Esparza, and I think I'm just going to start by introducing myself. So my whole thing, first of all, is implementing a ban on plastic straws in restaurants. I am founder and owner of an A&E straw shop, and that came about when I started my ocean beach cleanup. So I wanted to find a way to fundraise money for my beach cleanup, and I decided to start a straw shop where I sell a reusable straw along with a straw sleeve. And after seeing all the great feedback I was getting on the straws, I also stumbled upon this website called Lonely Well. And this website helps people that want to go ahead and spread the word about banning plastic straws. I know a lot of people ask, why are people focusing on banning straws? Well, straws make the top 10 list of items found during an international coastal cleanup. Another fact is Americans use over 500 million straws every day. And then another fun fact is plastic waste takes up to 1,000 years to decompose in landfills. So this was a great idea, especially here in the state of California, since most cities, I believe, have banned and taxed plastic straws. So the next step was, of course, to ban straws. I was invited by a local community group in Carmel, California. They asked me to donate a couple of my stainless steel straws. And not only did they ask for a donation, they also invited me to join a group of advocates that were focused on banning straws in restaurants. And at the moment, in the city of Carmel, we gathered, we had a couple group meetings, we brainstormed and shared our ideas and resources. The big help that we had was from Lonely Well. It's a foundation found on their website that, like I said before, focuses on spreading the awareness of plastic pollution and also, of course, banning straws. There's a group of 15 people, and we decided to divide that group into small little, groups. Group A was focused on attending city council meetings. Group B, to start a dialogue with residents to bring awareness about plastic pollution. And Group C, to visit restaurants, inform managers about straws, and share helpful resources. And Lonely Well has a great toolkit which you could download. And if you have any questions, they could go ahead and answer those questions as well. So I just want to show you a little bit of what you can find in that toolkit. So Section A talks about plastic straw facts, 2 different ways of joining the movement, whether it's pledging your support, switching your straw, or starting a campaign, which is something that we did. Section 3 was helpful toolkits to spread the word. And the last section was any tips and resources. Step 1 for us was to talk to residents. I think this is a huge key because you want to let people know why you want to implement this ban. I think if you don't talk to the community, you all of a sudden take away straws, they see it as, believe it or not, as a bad thing. The fact that you're taking something away that they've been using for so many years. And I think it's really helpful to inform them about it. So not only did we talk to people around the area in public, but we also spread the word on social platforms. And Lonely Well has a lot of great templates for that. Step 2, we had Group B talk to restaurants. We shared that we had a template for them on how to get started and help them also align their assets. And the venue kit also has ways to support their staff and educate them as well. And also downloadable training presentations and plastic straw facts. The last thing, and something that we are still working on, and I think we've been seeing a lot of progress, is starting a petition. This is very detailed. There's a lot that you have to do, but I think the main thing here is starting a dialogue and also getting to know your city leaders, because they'll let you know about anything, any questions you have about starting a petition, of what legitimate files you have to fill out. So I think the first thing you should do is, like I said, talk to community leaders, get their opinion on things. Number 2 is to do as much research as possible, and then you could start drafting a position from there. But the main key is to try to be as clear as possible and ask yourself questions that you might ask someone who is putting together a petition when it comes to banning straws. As a result, after getting all that situated and talking to city councils, we did end up banning plastic straws in 54 restaurants in Carmel, California. Restaurants decided to go with paper straws, and Carmel City is in the works of banning straws in the city and also banning a city next door, which is Monterey, California. So now the great thing about the result is that residents are more aware of what they're consuming when it comes to plastic, being more aware of their single-use item use. So I've been seeing a lot of people, especially on my Instagram, ask me for any recommendations or suggestions on how to go about replacing any single-use item. So we're seeing a lot of community, a lot of people connecting with each other. So residents tend to underestimate how much power one has. I think that's the one thing that I learned while working with these people, and especially when it came to starting the petition, is that we don't know how much power we have and how much change we could do within our community. So the number one advice: build a relationship with your city leaders, city council. You need them as much as you do. Residents and city leaders go hand in hand. It makes a city stronger. And also, I really like to emphasize and implore residents to attend public meetings. That is the best way to get everything started, is to talk to your city council members. So that's something I really want to emphasize. That is all. I have my information on how to download that kit from Lonely Well or Strawless Ocean, and then my shop, Instagram, Twitter, and a little bit more about my Ocean Beach cleanup.
Okay, Abril, it looks like some folks are typing questions. If you want to just take a look at the chat and answer them.
All right, so Lynn Newman asks, how long did this process take? This took about almost 2 years. I think it took like about a year to get everyone together, and then and it's still in process. I think the one thing that took less was banning the straws in restaurants, just because you don't really need any like permission or anything to talk to with the council members. I think the one thing that takes the longest is getting that petition. That could take more than like a year and a half or two. I mean, I think it's been about 2 years now, and we are just getting this petition on the local city ballot. Do you find a utility for communities to have a personal strawage pledge as well as a pledge for restaurants? Yes, I do find a utility for communities to have a personal strawage pledge. There's a couple of resources where you could do that, and I think that having people do it on their own can really emphasize that in the community to I guess wake up others. There is resources on the Lonely Well where you could find out more ways of making a pledge and sending it out to local leaders.
Great. Abril, there was another question from Greg Thornton
Okay.
in the chat.
Is everything on this presentation in the kit, or is there a way to get a copy of the presentation? To this exact presentation, no, but if you really are interested in the kit, you could go ahead and check out strawlessocean.org, and you'll find, I think you just enter your email and they'll send you the downloadable kit.
Okay, great. So that was Greg's question. Then Victor has a question here.
Okay. What were some common arguments you received from the restaurants? Oh, man. Just recently, we had a restaurant owner complain because he did do back in November, there was a strawless November month. He eliminated straws, plastic straws, and replaced them with paper straws. And believe it or not, all the customers were furious at the fact that they weren't serving any more plastic straws. So I think this is a great example when I said that it's great to also communicate and educate your residents about why it's so important to ban straws. I think when you just take away something, they can't really comprehend the reason why you're eliminating it. Yeah, we had customers in that situation just get very bothered at the fact that we eliminated that. But I think if we were to, tell them a little bit more about why, the importance of not using plastic, it would have maybe gone a little bit more better.
Okay, so it looks like there aren't any more questions. Jacob, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull up my presentation real quick, and we'll jump into that. All right, so like Abril did, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. I'm Jacob Oblander. I'm the outreach coordinator, sort of coastal coordinator for Savannah Riverkeeper. We're based out of South Carolina and Georgia. I do a lot of work with educating folks and raising awareness, as well as some issue-specific work with permits, construction, and projects that happen along the Savannah River and its tributaries. I'm based out of Savannah, Georgia here. So the story I'm going to talk about, like the example I'm going to use is Ebenezer Creek is one of our tributaries that is extremely important. Its community value cannot be oversold to the area where it is in Georgia. It's where folks go to fish. They teach their kids to fish there. Their grandfathers taught them to fish there. It's where they go to swim, spend their weekends. It's also a really unique waterway ecologically, in that it's a blackwater, backwater tributary. So it's very special, very unique. And we've only got 2 of these kind of creeks left on the Savannah, when we used to have quite a few more. But the big thing we focused on is community value, and the value this creek holds in the lives of the folks who live around it. Starting in 2013 and 2014, the State Development Board of Georgia invited this company, DRT America, subsidiary of a turpentine company out of France, was brought in. The public received almost no notice, and they started construction as soon as they had permits for construction, but no permits received for wastewater or any of the other facilities or utilities. So they basically just built a building without any idea of where all the waste was going to go from this process. And if you're not familiar with turpentine processing, what they're doing is cooking down wood products to create resins that are used in a multitude of items that are sold commercially. They really did nothing to let the local folks know this was happening. We found out about it finally when a permit came through for wastewater from the state, and we realized that we had a problem and that they wanted to dump this waste into Ebenezer Creek. And the big thing about it was that even if the water was perfectly clean coming out of this plant, it would have still messed up the creek because it's not regular water. It's really acidic creek naturally, and so this would have destroyed the creek and its environment. So the big thing we did was we spread awareness. And that involved a lot of boots on the ground. We had to bring out our volunteers from as much as we could just to walk the streets of the community that they wanted to take the waste. Because DRT's plan was to send their waste to a small community's wastewater treatment plant and have them deal with it. And of course, they did the same thing that all these companies do, which is they promise jobs. Well, they're promising about 15 jobs compared to the, I would say, 60 to 80 that are provided by tourism to this creek. So the big thing we did was we focused on shop owners, restaurants, folks who relied on the visitors coming to their area. And we put out these signs like you can see on the slide. And we reminded these people how important this creek is to their everyday lives, to their enjoyment, their recreation, their history. This creek also plays a vital role in the history because many of these folks along this creek are the descendants of the original colony members who came to this area in the 1700s. So for them, the history is vitally important. And so that's one of the big things we pushed was losing part of their history. And so that was a big part of it was education. We had several community meetings at churches, schools, the local library, to get folks to come out and learn what we were talking about and why this was an issue and explain the whole thing. Because that was a big part of the problem is people just didn't understand. Because in Georgia, paper production and any kind of wood timber-related industry is really what's valued because it's one of the best employers in the state, especially in rural areas. So there was a bit of a fight to sort of help people understand why this didn't make sense, why we shouldn't let a company from another country who's coming here specifically because the laws in their own country are tighter than ours environmentally. So DRT is a French company, so they set up these paper mills and plants all over the southeastern United States because the laws here are a lot looser than the ones in France. So we didn't want them to do that. And we're also now currently working to try and change some stuff. But the resolution was people showed up. This is one of the meetings they had that allowed for public comment. There's so many people. The first one, they had to have the second one to allow more people to speak out and give their voice. So they ran out of time. So people came and they spoke, and the emotion was important. And they talked about the history of the creek and its meaning to the community, not just economically, but emotionally and, well, to be honest, spiritually, because the oldest church in Georgia, the oldest brick church in Georgia was actually built on the banks of this creek. There's a lot of community value there. I mean, this is the church where a lot of these folks go, and so it's an important place for them. They don't want it to be ruined and destroyed. And the other value that was with us interesting was we worked with the local city council, mayor, and city manager, and it was evident pretty quickly they were upset that these folks had come in and done all this without talking to them first, without talking to the local state had done this. And that was an important thing to think about, is that the locals have a different standpoint than anyone higher up on the food chain as far as politics go. The other part of the resolution is that we're currently in a place to possibly get rid of this plant entirely, because right now they're operating but shipping all the liquid waste elsewhere to be dealt with. So we're still working, still following up on it to try and see if we can get the plant to entirely shut down, as well as try and see if we can change regulation to not allow this kind of thing to happen again. That's sort of the end resolution, was we got folks to show up. It wasn't so much about what we did specifically. Our big thing was just getting people to be aware. And that's sort of the big fight, I think, is education awareness is always what we're kind of going for. So yeah, and that's what I've got. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat.
So how many times a year do you have cleanups?
We do them probably at least 6-7 times a year. We do cleanups. We do community-based ones right inside of neighborhoods, both urban and more rural and suburban neighborhoods, as well as probably another half, or the other half are done at boat ramps or water-based, like out on creeks. One of the photos, my presentation actually, this was during a cleanup on Ebenezer Creek that we did with community members. We had people on the creek starting from 3 different boat ramps who all met up. We pulled out about half a ton of garbage, including a lot of tires, flat screen TVs.
Wow.
And you can see in here an exercise ball.
Oh,
Fully inflated is weird.
Wow.
Yeah, we do have some, Lynn, we do have an example actually on our river. So about halfway up the Savannah River between Augusta and Savannah, is a creek called Briar Creek. Briar Creek is similar to Ebenezer Creek in that it is a blackwater tributary, which means that the tannic acid from all the cypress trees that makes the water black, and it's much more acidic, lower pH. Well, in about 2004, I think it was, there was a company nearby, a chemical production company, that was discharging a good amount of waste. And the waste was a lot more basic than what was naturally in the creek. And because it was a low water time, that discharge sat in the wetlands and just sat there. But when some rains came in the spring, it raised the level of the creek, causing those waters to mix. And because of such a big difference in the pH of the water did what's called flipping, which means it dramatically changed like overnight. And it killed about 5,000 fish, including a lot of spawning fish, because wetlands are where fish, especially in the southern rivers, it's where they go to spawn in the spring. They swim up into the wetlands when the water rises, and they spawn there and then swim back out into the main waterways and channels. And so that flip basically decimated the population for about 5 years of largemouth bass, shad. We saw damage with sunfish like bluegill and redbreast, catfish, which are actually really important species for a lot of our rural populations who still subsistence fish on sort of a recreational basis. I think Christina has a question here for Abril.
The pros and cons. Well, I didn't really have many cons. I think the only downfall when it came to talking to restaurants about switching to something more green friendly, they didn't want to spend money buying paper straws constantly. So a couple of them started by still keeping plastic straws on the side, and instead of just placing a paper straw in the drinks when someone ordered a drink, they would just not just give the cup without any type of straw and just have this ask upon request kind of thing going on. And I think that kind of made them save a little bit more money, because some of them were really focused on just not spending money on something quote unquote just like not important. I think we had a lot of luck with the city council. They were very open about the whole straw thing, so I don't think we had any cons. Unfortunately, there's a couple of cities, like in my hometown of Salinas, we're having a bit of trouble trying to persuade restaurants to accommodate paper straws or something, more green friendly. But I think it just depends on the city. But even if you have trouble within your community, any businesses or city councils, I think just pushing it and inviting more people to join start a group. And I think when you just like push something and you just fight for it, I think little by little you start, you're going to get people to reciprocate with your beliefs and what you think is, right, which is, banning any type of single-use item.
Really quick, back to Lynn asked about aftermath. There have been some examples. The Ogeechee River had a good example a few years back where a paint company, King, I believe it was King Chemical, spilled a massive amount of paint into the Ogeechee River, causing a large fish kill, and they were forced to pay out quite a bit of money for conservation efforts to try and reestablish some of the fish populations. So that's one of the things that riverkeepers do. If you have a riverkeeper in your local river or a waterkeeper of any kind, that's one of the big things we do is we sue those companies, act as a watchdog, sort of when the state doesn't step in and do their job. That's the idea.
Jacob, have you seen any difference or like change within that lake that you were showing or talking about earlier when it comes to like the trash?
Yeah, we have actually. Over the last few years, we've done more and more of these Rivers Alive, which is a Georgia program that they run. They give out trash bags and stuff and T-shirts and help people organize community cleanups. Mm-hmm. And I think since we've started working more with the locals there, with Savannah Riverkeeper, I'm our first staff member permanently on the lower part of the river. And as awareness has grown, we're seeing less big garbage. We're still getting into small stuff that people may have missed or things like that. But we're seeing more of a turnaround, I think, with less garbage out there sometimes, less just direct dumping. At least it appears that way right now.
Okay, you have another question.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of metrics for the river we look at. For different parts, it's different stuff. I mean, a lot of the big stuff I look at personally that we keep an eye on is we do monthly or even more often monitoring of chemical parameters, things like pH, so how acidic or basic it is, temperature, because when you have things like a lot of direct runoff, it can really affect the overall temperature of the water. We also look at salinity for our river because we're seeing a rise in sea level, but we're also seeing a rise in the salt water because of the harbor deepening in the Savannah Harbor. If you followed any or seen any of the national news about that, Savannah Harbor is still in the process of being deepened, and it's also just interesting because when they first started the process, there was very little mitigation planned, and so we've seen a lot of those efforts started. But one of the things we're watching for is that salt water is rising up in our river. It's killing off cypress trees, some of them 400 to 500 years old, and so it's sort of a pretty rough thing to see. But one of the other big things we look at, of course, is dissolved oxygen. And dissolved oxygen is important, obviously, because fish got to breathe. Without dissolved oxygen, you end up with things like stagnant dead water, fish kills, and that's some of the things we've seen in the Savannah before. Is during the summer with the really deep water, we don't have mixing, and we don't get oxygen to the deep parts of the water. And so migrating fish like sturgeon, shad, striped bass, they end up dying in the harbor in pretty large numbers. Those are some of the parameters. We also look, of course, at E. coli numbers, and that's important for things like swimming and fishing. Colleen, the way that data is shared is Georgia has a program called Adopt a Stream. If you look up Georgia Adopt a Stream on Google or some search engine, you'll find it. But South Carolina is also stepping up. I'm not sure where are you based out of, Colleen? Because some states in the United States and some countries are starting to look at having these programs where the databases are housed within state or federal agencies. But we share our data through Georgia Adopt a Stream. Oh yeah, so New York has, depending on where you are in New York, you've got some different programs up there. The Hudson River Estuary Program does some work. I used to work with them that way. And different groups do different citizen monitoring. And so citizen monitoring can be vastly important just because state agencies don't have the money, nor do they want to advocate that much resources to simple, basic monitoring like this. You end up having citizens do a lot of work, especially school groups and students. It's a very basic set of steps that can be followed. And so we work with Georgia Adopt a Stream, which is a great program. They have a very set protocol. It's EPA quality assured and quality controlled. So that data can actually be used. It's not admissible in court, but it can be used by state agencies to identify places that need further testing.
So how about now we open things up, more of an open forum. So if you have any questions about your efforts, please feel free to add them to the chat room, and you can get the perspectives or opinions either from Abril, Jacob, or myself, so we can hear about what you're doing and provide some insights on our end. So I'll make sure that on the website for SOP Technologies, when we reply with the video recording for this, I'll also include the slide presentations on there so you can download them on the same event page, the video recording, and contact details for both Jacob and Abril.
I see we have a question from Lynn. Lynn, when we talk about state strategies, do you mean with the straws or with water quality kind of issues? Can you be more specific? I mean, one of the big things that I've seen with those groups, with that kind of push, with any kind of statewide push, is making sure that you've got enough legislators on board, and approaching them individually can be the big part of that plastic bag ban. I remember they're still working on that when I was living in New Paltz. That work had already started. I think a big part of it is local communities passing their own ordinances first and sort of showing a bottom up, sort of a grassroots to the top kind of motion can be extremely important for that. I don't know what Abril's experience is like with this, but that's sort of what I've seen, is that having the small local groups say it first. And we've seen that with the offshore drilling fight as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd piggyback on what you said about just having the community, or just like any putting together a big group could make a difference. Oh, Lynn, here in New York, we are pushing for plastic bag legislation statewide. There is a coalition that includes the Hudson Riverkeeper with other environmental organizations. It has failed in the past. What sort of approach served best for educating others? I think the best approach was one of my groups had a great feedback when they just went out to the public and just like stopped anyone and just, asked their opinion about things. I think that was, one of the biggest and helpful approaches, and tips that I would suggest you guys do if you guys want to start some sort of banning or, yeah.
I can see we have a question from Victor, which is what sort of approach serves best for educating others? And if I can speak to that a couple seconds, which is basically for me, it's in listening first is like a huge part of that. Understanding where they're coming from, their perspective, and why this issue matters to them more directly. It's about finding a way to connect that issue with them. And that's what I've seen.
Okay, great. So what we'll do now, if there aren't any more questions, we'll share the video of this whole presentation with everybody. We'll also provide the contact information for Jacob and Abril so you can connect with them. We'll share their presentations as well. Next week, we'll have another webcast. We'll have someone from Colorado and also someone from Belgium that will be joining and presenting. And the goal really here is to have more collaboration and communication at a global scale. So please feel free to invite others to these as well. If you have any additional questions that we couldn't get to, just send them to me via email, or you can connect directly with Jacob or Abril afterwards and collaborate with them. And I'll hold off a few more seconds in case there are any other questions on the chat. If not, if you just want to leave us qualitative feedback about this presentation, that would be much appreciated, and just feel free to add it to the chat.
Thank you all for coming in.
Okay, thanks Colleen, thanks Greg. Received your chat there, much appreciated.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you.
Serapio Gonzalez, gracias to you too. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Victor, much appreciated. Okay, thank you. So I've added there a link to our website. We will be sending updates via email. Like I said, the video, the presentations, contact information. And we want to thank you once again for joining the webcast. Looking forward to having you here more often, to spreading the word. We're aiming to do this as frequently as we can. Right now it's weekly, and we're bringing a global audience together.